I am Ethan, 35 years old. 3 weeks ago, I stood in the back hallway of a crowded, upscale restaurant and stared at my 8-year-old daughter's birthday cake, which had been shoved upside down into a greasy, black garbage can. While my little girl was waiting in her beautiful blue party dress, my own parents stood by and watched my older brother laugh. He looked me right in the eye, without a single ounce of regret, and said she was not worth wasting a cake on. They humiliated my daughter in front of 24 people just to prove a point about who was the priority in our family. But there is one major thing my family did not know. They thought I was just a struggling single dad working a low-level event planning job, barely scraping by on a meager salary. They had absolutely no idea I was actually the majority co-owner of the luxury hospitality group that owned the very venue where my brother was supposed to get married in 3 days. And right now, they are facing a massive corporate lawsuit and begging on their knees for my forgiveness. Before I tell you exactly how I tore his perfect, entitled life apart, please hit that like button if you believe toxic family members deserve to face the absolute harshest consequences of their actions. And please let me know where you are watching from in the comments down below. Now, let us go back to the afternoon that changed everything. It was supposed to be a simple, beautiful Saturday afternoon. My daughter Lily was turning 8. Money had been incredibly tight for me in the past, especially right after my brutal divorce. But this year, I wanted to do something undeniably special for her. I rented out the private dining room at a nice local restaurant. Lily had spent 3 straight weeks talking about this cake. She picked it out herself from an artisan bakery across town. It was a 3-tier vanilla sponge cake with fresh strawberry filling, coated in pristine white icing, and decorated with delicate, hand-spun purple sugar butterflies arranged around her name. Every single night before bed, she would ask me if I thought the butterflies would look real, if the icing would be sweet enough, and if her grandparents would be proud of her when she blew out the candles. She wore a bright blue dress with a little silver paper crown she made at school. She was completely buzzing with that pure, innocent excitement only a child can possess. My family was there. My older brother Julian, my mother Eleanor, and my father Arthur. Julian was getting married to his fiancée, Clara, the following weekend. For the last 6 months, our entire family dynamic had revolved completely around Julian's wedding. Every single conversation, every phone call, every weekend dinner, every holiday gathering was hijacked by his seating charts, his catering choices, his tuxedo fittings, and his endless complaints about the stress he was under. I did not mind at first. I am a professional in the event space, so I naturally stepped back and let him have the spotlight. I recommended vendors. I reviewed his contracts. I even warned him that high-end venues require final payment weeks in advance. But I thought, just for 2 hours on a Saturday afternoon, my family could focus their attention on my little girl. I left the main dining room to go to the back kitchen area to ask the waitstaff for a lighter for the candles. I carried a stack of small paper plates in my hand. The hallway was quiet, smelling heavily of roasted garlic, burnt coffee, and industrial dish soap. As I walked past the prep station, I glanced down at the large black trash can sitting near the swinging kitchen doors. My heart completely stopped in my chest. There, sitting upside down among coffee grounds, discarded lemon wedges, and greasy napkins, was Lily's cake. The pristine pink frosting was smeared violently against the plastic liner. The beautiful purple sugar butterflies she had been so incredibly excited about were snapped in half, buried under a pile of discarded receipts. The delicate white icing that spelled out her name had been dragged through the filth like it meant absolutely nothing. I stood there frozen. The ambient sound of the restaurant faded out completely, replaced by a loud, high-pitched ringing in my ears. Behind me, I heard the distinct sound of leather shoes scuffing against the tile. I turned around to see Julian leaning casually against the doorframe, wearing a smug, arrogant grin that did not even pretend to be apologetic. My mother and father were right behind him. My mother had one hand pressed nervously to her mouth, and my father was looking at his watch, completely unbothered. I looked at Julian. My voice was dangerously quiet. I asked him exactly what he thought he was doing. Julian crossed his arms, let out a short, dismissive laugh, and said the words that will be permanently burned into my brain for the rest of my life. Honestly, Ethan, she wasn't worth wasting a cake on. Clara's parents are out there in the main room. We are trying to finalize the seating chart and the floral arrangements for the wedding, and your kid was making way too much noise about a stupid dessert. I needed the table space for the blueprints. She is 8 years old. She will forget about it by Tuesday. I looked directly at my mother. I expected her to gasp. I expected her to scold him, to step up and defend her granddaughter, to do what a protective grandmother is fundamentally supposed to do. Instead, she pressed her lips together tightly, looked at me with pleading eyes, and whispered that I should just let it go and not make a scene. My father looked away, silently agreeing with Julian, silently confirming that my daughter's joy was entirely disposable if it inconvenienced his golden child. Right at that exact moment, Lily walked around the corner. She had come looking for me. She saw the trash can. She saw the crushed purple butterflies. The joy completely drained from her small, radiant face. She looked up at me, her lower lip trembling violently, her little hands gripping the edges of her blue dress. She was trying desperately to process how her beautiful cake, the one she had dreamed about for weeks, had ended up in the garbage before anyone even sang for her. I did not scream. I did not throw a punch. I did not hurl a plate at my brother's head. Even though every single instinct in my body screamed at me to do so, I dropped the paper plates on the floor. I walked over, picked my daughter up, felt her tiny, trembling arms lock tightly around my neck, and walked straight out the back door of that restaurant. I did not say goodbye. I drove her home in complete silence, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned stark white. I thought that was the end of it. I thought I had finally seen the absolute rock bottom of my family's cruelty and narcissism. I assumed we would just stop speaking until the wedding was over. I was so incredibly, dangerously wrong. The very next morning, a Sunday, at exactly 7 o'clock, my phone started ringing. It was my mother. I let it ring 3 times before I finally answered, expecting some kind of pathetic, half-hearted apology for the cake incident. Instead, she was sobbing hysterically, her voice shrill and panicked. "Ethan, you have to call the venue right now. You have to fix this immediately. They just called Julian and told him they are canceling his wedding." I sat at my kitchen counter, looking at Lily's silver paper crown sitting abandoned on the table. My voice was completely dead, devoid of any empathy or emotion. I told her that sounded entirely like his problem, and not mine. My mother started screaming through the speaker, her voice echoing in my quiet kitchen. "He said you knew about this. You are the financial guarantor on the account. They are saying his final payment never cleared the bank, and because your company name is on the file, they need your direct authorization to extend the payment deadline. If you do not call them by 5 o'clock today, the grand ballroom is released to another client. You are destroying your brother's life over a stupid grudge." I hung up the phone without saying another word. I opened my laptop. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a cold, rising fury. I logged into my business email account. There was an urgent, high-priority message sitting in my inbox from the billing and compliance department of the Grand Hotel where Julian was hosting his reception. The subject line read in bold red letters, "Final notice regarding Reynolds' Hart wedding reservation. Guarantor signature required." I opened the attached PDF document. My stomach dropped into a bottomless pit. I read the document twice because my brain simply refused to process the sheer audacity of what my eyes were seeing. It was a standard corporate liability and financial guarantee contract. But right there, at the bottom of the second page, was the legally binding name of my company, my highly confidential corporate tax identification number, my old office phone number, and a scanned signature that looked remarkably, terrifyingly like mine. The venue was not simply asking me to step in and help. According to their official financial records, my professional corporate account had been legally pledged to secure Julian and Clara's massive wedding reservation. Julian had not just thrown away my daughter's birthday cake. He had crossed a massive legal line. He had committed felony wire fraud, forged my signature, and tied my entire business reputation to a $35,000 wedding debt. and he fully expected me to just swallow the abuse and cover for him. To truly understand the breathtaking arrogance of what Julian had just done, you have to understand the deeply toxic dynamic that had poisoned our family for decades. Julian was always the golden boy. From the very moment we were children, the sun rose and set on whatever Julian wanted, whatever Julian needed, and whatever Julian demanded. If Julian wanted to play competitive travel baseball, my parents bought him the most expensive gear on the market, hired private coaches, and I was forced to sit silently in the hot metal bleachers every single weekend of my childhood. If Julian failed a math class, it was because the teacher was incompetent and the curriculum was flawed. If he got a reckless driving ticket in high school, my father paid it off quietly, hired a traffic lawyer to expunge the record, and told me never to mention it to anyone. When it came time for college, the disparity became undeniable. My parents had set up a college fund. For years, they told us it was meant to be split evenly between the two of us. But when Julian got accepted into a prestigious, wildly expensive out-of-state business school, my parents sat me down and handed over the entire college fund to him. They looked me in the eye and claimed he was going into high finance, that his degree required more capital, and that I was smart enough to figure it out on my own. I did not argue. I took out massive, suffocating student loans and worked the grueling night shift at a downtown hotel front desk just to pay my way through a local state college. I never complained. I just kept my head down, worked hard, and accepted my designated role as the family background character. But the real, unbridgeable divide happened during my divorce 5 years ago. I was married to a woman named Rachel. Looking back, it is glaringly obvious why I married her. Rachel was a lot like Julian. She was selfish, fiercely driven by social appearances, and deeply, covertly manipulative. When our marriage inevitably fell apart, the divorce process was nothing short of a bloodbath. Rachel came after absolutely everything. She hired an aggressive lawyer and went after my salary, my meager retirement accounts, and she fought tooth and nail for full physical custody of Lily. She did not fight for Lily because she possessed a deep maternal instinct. She fought for Lily because she wanted the maximum child support payments to fund her lavish, superficial lifestyle. During that incredibly dark, isolating period of my life, I desperately needed my family. I needed emotional support. I needed a temporary place to stay while the court system forcefully sorted out the real estate situation with our marital home. And most importantly, I needed a small financial loan to help cover the exorbitant retainer fees for a competent family lawyer. I went to my parents' house, sat across from them at their mahogany dining room table, and swallowed my pride to ask for help. My father looked at me with cold, calculating eyes. He told me that a real man does not lose control of his wife, and that he would absolutely not waste his hard-earned retirement money funding a messy, embarrassing public divorce. Julian, who was sitting right there sipping a beer, chimed in with a cruel smirk. He told me I was acting like a dramatic victim and that I was becoming a severe financial burden on the family's reputation. I was entirely on my own. I fought a brutal, exhausting legal battle. I took on massive credit card debt to hire the most ruthless family lawyer I could find. And against all odds, I won. I secured full physical custody of Lily. Rachel walked away with a significant chunk of my early savings and the equity from the house, but I got the only thing in the world that actually mattered to me. After the divorce was finalized, my family treated me like a damaged, pathetic charity case. My Aunt Martha, a woman who practically ran the local HOA meetings and thrived entirely on spreading toxic neighborhood gossip, started telling everyone in our extended family network that I was a bitter, broke single father. She spun a narrative that I was deeply jealous of Julian's rising corporate success. Julian had recently landed a middle management job at a regional logistics firm and loved to flaunt his heavily leased luxury cars and financed designer watches. They all looked down on me. They thought I was barely scraping by in a tiny apartment, planning small corporate lunches and cheap birthday parties just to keep the lights on. What they did not know, what I strictly refused to tell a single soul in that entire bloodline, was that my small event planning business had exploded into a massive enterprise. During my years working the hotel night shift, I had befriended a brilliant, wealthy real estate investor. He saw my work ethic, After my divorce, he approached me with a partnership offer. Together, we quietly began buying up distressed commercial real estate. We acquired struggling, outdated event spaces, completely renovated them, and rebranded them into premium, ultra-luxury hospitality venues. I went from being a freelance coordinator desperately trying to pay off legal debt to the co-founder and majority shareholder of a massive corporate group that owned 4 of the most exclusive, highly sought-after properties in the state. I kept my wealth entirely hidden behind corporate trusts and non-disclosure agreements. I drove a modest, reliable SUV. I lived in a nice but completely unassuming suburban home. I dressed in plain clothes. I knew with absolute certainty that if my parents or Julian ever found out about my actual net worth, or the massive inheritance and trust fund I was actively building for Lily, they would swarm me like starving vultures. They would demand high-risk investments, unsecured loans, and endless handouts. They would try to manipulate my daughter to get to my bank accounts. I wanted peace. I just wanted to raise my daughter in a quiet, safe environment, completely insulated from their toxic entitlement. That fragile peace was violently shattered the moment I saw Lily's cake sitting in the garbage. I was suddenly pulled out of my dark memories by the sound of small, hesitant footsteps on the hardwood floor. I looked up from the glaring screen of my laptop. Lily was standing in the doorway of the kitchen, clutching her worn-out stuffed rabbit tightly to her chest. Her big brown eyes were red, swollen, and puffy from crying herself to sleep the night before. I closed the laptop quickly, hiding the fraudulent contract, and forced a warm, reassuring smile onto my face. I walked over and knelt down on the floor in front of her, bringing myself to her eye level. She looked down at the floorboards, refusing to meet my eyes. "Daddy?" she whispered, her voice incredibly fragile. "What is it, sweetheart?" I asked, gently smoothing a stray piece of hair behind her ear. Did Uncle Julian throw my beautiful cake away because I was bad? Did I talk too loud? Did I ruin his wedding meeting? Her words hit me like a physical, heavy punch directly to the chest. The sheer innocence in her voice, the devastating fact that my family's relentless cruelty had successfully made this sweet, kind, perfectly behaved little girl question her own inherent worth. It ignited a roaring fire of protective rage inside my chest that I had never, ever felt before. I took both of her small hands in mine. I looked her directly in the eyes, making sure she felt the absolute conviction in my soul. "Lily, listen to me very carefully. You are perfect. You did absolutely nothing wrong. You are the best thing that has ever happened to me. Sometimes, grown-ups are deeply broken inside. They have ugly, mean feelings, and they try to make other people feel small so they can pretend to feel big. Uncle Julian is a very small, very sad man. And I promise you, with everything I have, nobody will ever treat you like that again. Do you understand me?" She nodded slowly, a tiny bit of the heavy burden lifting from her small shoulders, a small sigh of relief washing over her face. I stood up, made her a massive plate of her favorite chocolate chip pancakes, sat with her at the table while she ate every bite, and promised her we would have a spectacular redo birthday party next weekend, with the absolute biggest cake she had ever seen. Once she was settled comfortably in the living room watching her favorite morning cartoons, I walked back into my home office and locked the heavy oak door behind me. The patient, forgiving brother was dead. The protective father, the ruthless businessman, was fully awake. I opened the forged contract on my screen again. Julian had deliberately weaponized my business name to secure a luxury venue he knew he could never afford. He had risked my corporate standing, my credit rating, and my professional reputation, assuming I would be too weak, too conditioned by years of suffocating family guilt, to fight back. He assumed I would simply pay the massive balance to avoid the public embarrassment of a canceled family wedding. He had absolutely no idea he had just forged the signature of the man who owned the very building he was trying to steal from. I picked up my cell phone. The time for keeping the peace was officially over. It was time for a reckoning. I dialed the direct, unlisted line for Sarah, the senior corporate events manager at the venue. Sarah and I had worked together closely for over 3 years. She was brilliant, meticulous, and fiercely loyal. She knew I was the primary owner of the property group, but per my incredibly strict legal instructions, she maintained absolute confidentiality. To the general public and to arrogant clients like my brother Julian, the property was managed by an anonymous corporate trust based out of state. Sarah answered on the second ring, her voice crisp and professional. Ethan, good morning. I saw your caller ID. I am assuming you saw the automated email from the billing department regarding the Reynolds account. I saw it, Sarah, I said, keeping my voice dead level, suppressing the rage boiling underneath. Pull up the master file for Julian's wedding. Walk me through, step by agonizing step, exactly how my company was illegally attached as the financial guarantor for his event. I could hear her typing rapidly on her mechanical keyboard, navigating the back-end software. Julian came into the office 2 weeks ago to finalize the premium catering menu and the expensive ballroom lighting upgrades. His personal credit card declined for the final $35,000 balance. He threw a bit of a tantrum, told me there was a bank error and that his funds were tied up in investments. Then he brought in a commercial guarantee form. He stated explicitly that his brother, Ethan, was his primary event coordinator and was officially backing the contract through his corporate account. He provided your exact business tax ID, a physical copy of your standard vendor agreement, and the signed authorization form, because I know he is your biological brother. And because the signature matched the master file perfectly, the billing department pushed it through to secure the date. My blood ran completely cold in my veins. Months ago, Julian had asked me for advice on dealing with florists and caterers. I had sent him a blank vendor agreement via email, simply to show him what standard legal terms looked like so he wouldn't get scammed by shady contractors. He had deliberately taken that document, stolen my highly confidential corporate tax ID off the header, digitally lifted my signature, and traced it onto the venue's liability form. Sarah, I said, my voice hardening into impenetrable steel, listen to me very carefully. I did not sign that form. I did not authorize that financial guarantee. He forged my signature. He committed fraud. There was a heavy, stunned silence on the other end of the line. Sarah was a seasoned professional who had seen her fair share of wedding drama, but this crossed into criminal territory. She immediately grasped the massive legal gravity of the situation. Ethan, my God, that is felony wire fraud. Do you want me to terminate the contract and cancel the event right now? I can have security lock down the ballroom. Not yet, I said, a cold, calculating plan forming in my mind. Follow standard corporate procedure to the letter. Send him a final, formal notice of default. Tell him the corporate guarantor has officially flagged the signature as fraudulent. Tell him he has exactly until 5 o'clock tomorrow evening to pay the balance in full via direct wire transfer, or the contract is entirely null and void. The ballroom will be released, and the police will be immediately notified of the fraud. Do not, under any circumstances, tell him you spoke to me. Let him panic in the dark. Understood, sir, Sarah said, her tone shifting to strict business mode. I hung up the phone. Barely 20 minutes later, the aggressive crunch of tires sounded in my driveway. I looked out the front window and saw Julian's leased, overpriced BMW parked diagonally behind my SUV, blocking me in. Julian stormed up my concrete walkway, his face flushed red with panic and fury. He was followed closely by my father and mother, both looking incredibly agitated. They did not even bother ringing the doorbell. Julian started pounding on my heavy wooden front door with his closed fist, rattling the hinges. I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door, standing squarely in the frame, my physical presence blocking them from taking a single step inside my home. Julian's face contorted with rage. What the hell did you do, Ethan? He barked, pointing a shaking finger directly at my chest. The venue just emailed me. They said the guarantor form was flagged for fraud. Did you call them and cancel my guarantee? Are you out of your mind? I didn't cancel anything, I said coldly, staring him down. I simply told them the absolute truth, that I never signed that piece of paper. My father stepped forward, puffing out his chest, attempting to use his old, tired authoritarian intimidation tactics to force me into submission. Ethan, this behavior is entirely unacceptable. You are acting like a petulant, vindictive child because of a stupid piece of cake. Your brother is getting married in 3 days. Do you have any idea how much money has already been spent? You are going to pick up that phone, call that venue back right now, confirm the signature is yours, and handle the payment. We are a family. You do not do this to your own blood. I looked at my father, feeling a wave of absolute, sickening disgust wash over me. Family? He committed financial fraud. He forged my signature on a legally binding corporate contract for $35,000. That is a state crime, Dad. He is a criminal. Julian scoffed loudly, waving his hand in the air as if I was being utterly ridiculous and melodramatic. Oh, calm down, Ethan. Stop crying about it. It is a temporary hold on a credit line. I am getting huge cash gifts at the wedding reception from Clara's relatives. I was going to pay your stupid company back on Monday morning. I just needed your corporate credit score to hold the room. You have a business, you write things off on your taxes all the time. Stop being so incredibly cheap and ruinous. Where exactly did you get my corporate tax ID, Julian? I demanded, my voice dropping dangerously low, cutting through his pathetic excuses. That information is strictly confidential. It isn't public record. Julian hesitated for a fraction of a second. His eyes darted nervously to our mother. My mother burst into theatrical tears, her classic, reliable manipulation tactic to deflect accountability. She reached out and grabbed my arm, her voice trembling dramatically. Ethan, please, you have to understand. It was during the Thanksgiving dinner last year. You were outside in the yard playing with Lily. Julian was so incredibly stressed about the rising wedding costs. He was losing sleep. I went into your home office while you were outside. I found your business tax return sitting on your desk. I took a picture of it with my phone. I gave it to Julian. I just wanted to help my son. You always make things so incredibly difficult for him. If you were just a more generous brother, if you offered to help pay for the wedding like a normal sibling, we wouldn't have had to do this in the first place. I stared at her, the woman who actually gave birth to me. She had deliberately sneaked into my private office, in my own home, during a sacred holiday dinner, and stolen my highly sensitive corporate financial documents to help her golden child commit a felony. And somehow, in her deeply twisted, narcissistic mind, she was manipulating the narrative to make it my fault. Get your hands off me, I said, my voice like ice, stepping back and brushing her hand away. Ethan, be reasonable, my father demanded, his face turning purple with anger. If Clara's family finds out about this financial issue, the wedding is completely over. The Vances are wealthy, proud, respectable people in this community. They will absolutely not let their daughter marry a man who cannot even afford his own reception. You owe your brother this favor. You owe this family your loyalty. I don't owe you a damn thing, I said, staring them down, feeling taller and stronger than I ever had in my entire life. You stood by in that restaurant while he threw my daughter's birthday cake in the trash. You laughed at her pain. Now you steal my corporate identity? Listen to me very carefully, all of you. Julian has exactly until 5 o'clock tomorrow evening to find 35 grand. If any of you attempt to use my name or my company again, I will call the district attorney myself and have you arrested for conspiracy and fraud. I slammed the heavy door in their faces and locked the deadbolt with a loud, satisfying click. I stood in the hallway, listening to Julian scream vile curses and kick the porch railing before they finally retreated, got into their cars, and drove away. As the sound of their engines faded, my cell phone buzzed aggressively in my pocket. It was a call from an unknown local number. I pressed answer. Listen to me, you miserable, pathetic loser. A hostile, gravelly voice barked through the speaker. It was Leo, Julian's best man, his college roommate, and his longtime enabler. Julian just called me crying. He told me what you are doing. You are really going to sabotage your own brother's wedding over a bratty kid's birthday cake? What kind of monster are you? If you don't call the venue and fix this contract by tomorrow morning, I am going to make sure everyone in this entire city knows you're a jealous, toxic, deadbeat dad. You won't be able to show your face in public. Watch your back, Ethan. Are you officially threatening me, Leo? I asked calmly, pressing the record button on my phone interface. Take it however the hell you want. Fix the damn contract or we will ruin you. He sneered viciously and hung up. I looked at the dark screen of my phone. They really, truly thought I was helpless. They really thought they could bully, threaten, and guilt me into submission like they had when I was a teenager. I walked over to the kitchen island, picked up my car keys, and grabbed my jacket. I had a very important meeting to arrange. The clock was officially ticking. It was Tuesday morning, exactly 30 hours before the venue's final, non-negotiable payment deadline. I drove downtown, navigating the busy city traffic, and walked into the sleek, expansive glass-paneled offices of Thomas & Associates. Thomas was my lead corporate attorney. He handled all my commercial real estate acquisitions, corporate structuring, liability defense, and the massive trust funds I was building for Lily. He was an absolute shark in a perfectly tailored Italian suit, and he was the only person outside of my business partner who knew the full, staggering extent of my financial assets. I was ushered into his office immediately. I sat down in the heavy leather chair opposite him and silently slid the printed emails from the venue, the fraudulent contract, and a USB drive containing the recorded phone calls across his massive mahogany desk. Thomas adjusted his expensive glasses and read through the documents in complete silence. His eyes scanned the forged signature. When he finished reading, he looked up at me, his expression perfectly unreadable, professional to the core. This is a very clean forgery, Ethan. To the untrained eye of a billing clerk, it absolutely passes. But legally, this is textbook wire fraud, corporate identity theft, and financial malfeasance. With the recorded threat from the groomsmen, it elevates to extortion. If we hand this physical evidence over to the district attorney's office, your brother is looking at serious, mandatory prison time. The fines alone would bankrupt him. What exactly do you want to do? I don't want to send him to state prison, I said quietly, looking out the floor-to-ceiling window at the sprawling city skyline below. Not because I care about his freedom, but because Lily does not need the deep psychological trauma of her uncle going to jail permanently attached to her childhood memories. I want a watertight, impenetrable legal case. I want a formal cease and desist order ready to be served. I want a legally binding document stating that he assumes full, undivided liability for all debts incurred to the venue. And I want a comprehensive restraining order barring him, my parents, and his friends from coming within 500 feet of me, my home, my business offices, or my daughter. Thomas nodded slowly, his pen flying across his legal pad, taking meticulous notes. I can have my paralegals draft that before noon today. But Ethan, I need you to understand something clearly. Once you execute this legal maneuver, your relationship with your entire biological family is permanently, irrevocably over. There is absolutely no coming back from serving your parents with a restraining order. They ended the relationship the second they threw my daughter's birthday cake in the trash and then stole from me, I replied coldly, my resolve completely unbroken. Just get the legal paperwork ready. Have it couriered to me by tomorrow morning. I will handle the venue situation personally. As I was walking out of Thomas's massive office suite, my cell phone rang again. I looked at the caller ID and felt a sudden, sharp spike of adrenaline in my chest. It was Rachel, my ex-wife. She rarely ever called me unless it was to aggressively demand more money for extracurriculars she never enrolled Lily in, or to complain about the alimony schedule. I quickly pressed the record button on my phone app and answered. Hello, Rachel? I said smoothly, my voice completely guarded. Ethan, what the hell is wrong with your brain? Her voice was shrill, piercing, and dripping with venomous condescension. Julian just called me. He is in tears. He says you are having a complete mental breakdown and aggressively trying to ruin his beautiful wedding out of sheer jealousy. I stopped walking in the middle of the marble lobby. Julian had actually stooped low enough to call my bitter ex-wife to apply psychological pressure. Julian forged my signature on a $35,000 corporate contract. Rachel. He committed fraud. I am protecting my business and my livelihood. I don't care about your stupid, pathetic little event planning business, she snapped aggressively. Julian promised to help me pay the down payment for my new luxury SUV lease if I talked some sense into you. Listen to me very carefully, Ethan. If you ruin his wedding and cost me that money, I will take you straight back to family court. I will tell the judge you are mentally unstable, aggressively alienating your family, and entirely unfit to provide a safe, stable environment for Lily. I will demand a psychological evaluation. I will take full physical custody, and you will be paying me maximum child support for the rest of your miserable life. Do you understand me? Call the venue and fix it right now. I stood in the lobby of the law firm, perfectly still, surrounded by people in business suits rushing past me. She had just openly admitted to attempting extortion on a recorded line. She was weaponizing the custody of my daughter as a bargaining chip to secure a car lease funded by my brother's empty, desperate financial promises. Rachel, I said, my voice completely devoid of anger, entirely clinical and terrifyingly calm. You just explicitly threatened me with a malicious custody lawsuit in exchange for financial compensation from a third party. I have this entire phone call recorded on a legal application. If you ever, for the rest of your natural life, mention Lily's name in a threat against me again, my lawyer will file this exact recording with the family court judge before you can even blink. I will push aggressively to have your visitation rights revoked permanently on the grounds of emotional manipulation and extortion. Do not ever call this number again. I hung up the phone before she could even formulate a single syllable of a response. I walked out to my car, breathing slowly, the crisp city air filling my lungs. The storm was swirling violently all around me. They were throwing absolutely everything they had at me. Veiled threats, emotional guilt, financial blackmail, custody manipulation. But I was no longer the frightened, exhausted man going through a brutal divorce. I was an immovable anchor. I was a fortress. I drove directly to Lily's elementary school. I had already arranged a contingency plan with her homeroom teacher, Ms. Chloe. Ms. Chloe was a remarkably kind, observant woman who absolutely adored Lily. I had called her the previous night and explained in vague but urgent terms that there was a highly volatile family situation happening. I generously paid for Lily and 3 of her closest friends to go on a special, privately supervised field trip to the massive city aquarium with Miss Chloe for the entire day tomorrow. I wanted Lily completely, utterly out of the blast zone. I wanted her looking at sea turtles, laughing with her friends, and eating overpriced ice cream while I meticulously burned my family's toxic empire to the ground. That night, I sat alone in my dark living room, the only light coming from the blinking cursor on my laptop screen. Julian had less than 12 hours to produce $35,000. I knew for a fact he didn't have it. I knew he was going to show up at the venue tomorrow morning for the final walkthrough, hoping to scream, throw a tantrum, and intimidate the staff into bending the corporate rules. He fully thought he was walking into a fight with a low-level, easily bullied event planner. He didn't know he was walking into my building. He didn't know he was stepping into my arena. I picked up my phone and sent one single, decisive text message to Marcus, the brilliant CEO of my hospitality group. Marcus, I need you at the Grand Ballroom tomorrow morning at precisely 9 a.m. Wear your best suit. Bring the corporate ledger. We have a severe pest problem to eradicate. I thought the worst of the betrayal was over. I was so incredibly wrong. The real, earth-shattering explosion was just hours away, and it was going to leave nothing but ashes. The morning of the final venue deadline arrived with a chilling clarity. It was Wednesday. We were exactly 3 days away from the lavish wedding ceremony my brother Julian had built entirely on a foundation of lies, manipulation, and financial fraud. I woke up at 5 in the morning, long before the sun had even considered rising over the city skyline. I did not feel tired. I did not feel anxious. I felt a deep, profound sense of purpose that I had not experienced since the grueling days of my custody battle. I walked into my massive walk-in closet and bypassed the casual chinos and polo shirts I usually wore to blend in at school functions and neighborhood events. Today required armor. I pulled out my best tailored charcoal gray suit, a crisp white dress shirt, and a deep burgundy silk tie. I stood in front of the full-length mirror and methodically buttoned my cuffs. The tired, beaten-down man who had survived a brutal divorce and swallowed decades of family disrespect was completely gone. The quiet, compliant younger brother, who had spent his entire life shrinking to make his parents feel comfortable, was dead. In his place stood a fiercely protective father, a ruthless real estate developer, and a man who was about to permanently secure his daughter's inheritance. I left a note for the nanny I had hired for the morning, kissed my sleeping daughter on the forehead, and walked out to my garage. I bypassed my everyday SUV and uncovered the sleek, black luxury sedan I kept hidden for high-stakes corporate board meetings. I drove downtown, navigating the early morning city traffic with a cold, mechanical precision. My destination was the Grand Ballroom. This was the absolute crown jewel of our entire hospitality group portfolio. My business partner Marcus and I had spent millions of dollars renovating the historic property. We had installed imported Italian marble floors, massive antique crystal chandeliers that hung from the breathtaking vaulted ceilings, and floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked a meticulously manicured botanical garden. It was the kind of premier venue that instantly commanded respect the moment you walked through the heavy, brass-handled oak doors. It was a place built exclusively for people with real wealth, real influence, and real integrity. It was absolutely not built for people like my brother Julian, who leased their entire existence just to project a fake corporate salary. I bypassed the grand main entrance and pulled my car into the private, underground executive parking garage. I used my biometric keycard to enter the restricted staff elevator. I did not go out into the main lobby. Instead, I stepped directly into the hidden security monitoring room, situated directly behind the main reception desk. The room was dark, lined with high-definition surveillance monitors. From this vantage point, I had a perfect, unobstructed view of the expansive lobby through a large pane of one-way glass, and I could hear absolutely everything being said through the concealed audio feed. Julian was already there. He was wearing a sharply pressed, aggressively tailored navy blue suit, pacing back and forth across the polished marble floor like he owned the entire building. He constantly checked his heavy, finance designer watch. My mother and father were sitting together on a plush, tufted velvet sofa near the grand staircase. My mother was nervously twisting the expensive leather strap of her purse, her eyes darting around the room, clearly terrified that the $35,000 debt was about to ruin her perfect family image. My father was holding a copy of a financial newspaper, pretending to read the stock market reports, desperately trying to project an air of calm, patriarchal authority. A few agonizing moments later, the heavy glass front doors slid open. Clara, Julian's fiancée, walked into the lobby. She was a strikingly elegant woman, composed, highly educated, and deeply intelligent. She was accompanied by her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Vance. The Vances were the epitome of old American money. They were deeply entrenched in the city's high society, people who valued personal reputation, business integrity, and financial transparency above absolutely all else. They had paid for Clara's incredibly expensive college fund entirely out of pocket years ago, and they had generously contributed a massive, six-figure sum to the overall wedding budget, fully assuming that Julian was an equally successful professional matching their financial commitment. Julian immediately rushed over to greet them, his face instantly transforming into a sickeningly fake mask of charming enthusiasm. He kissed Clara on the cheek, offering a bright, plastic smile, and shook Mr. Vance's hand vigorously, pumping his arm up and down. "Julian, good morning," Mr. Vance said, his voice deep, resonant, and dripping with quiet authority. Clara mentioned there was some sort of minor administrative issue with the final venue payment. A temporary hold on a corporate card, she said. "We wanted to come down here personally and ensure everything was completely smoothed over. If you need us to write a cashier's check to bypass the bank delay and secure the ballroom, we are more than happy to do so." We cannot have any hiccups this close to the weekend. Julian let out a loud, forced, theatrical laugh that echoed uncomfortably against the marble walls. Oh, absolutely not, Mr. Vance. I appreciate the generous offer, but it is a completely ridiculous, laughable misunderstanding. My younger brother, Ethan, runs the small event coordination company handling the back-end logistics for the reception. His accounting department accidentally flagged a routine charge because of a mismatched tax ID number on their end. Ethan is driving down here right now to sign off on the final paperwork and clear the hold. It is just basic bureaucratic red tape. You know how these small businesses operate, always messing up the administrative details. He was lying directly to their faces without a single drop of sweat. He was standing right in the middle of my own building, actively covering up a felony fraud charge, and using my professional name to placate his wealthy, unsuspecting future in-laws. He was throwing me under the bus to protect his fragile ego. At that exact moment, Sarah, my senior corporate manager, stepped out from behind the massive mahogany reception desk. She held a thick, heavily documented manila folder in her hands. She looked absolutely immaculate in a dark business suit, entirely professional, and completely unbothered by Julian's aggressive, arrogant posturing. "Mr. Reynolds," Sarah said, her voice cutting through the lobby like a sharp blade, addressing Julian directly. "The absolute final deadline for the outstanding account balance of $35,000 is fast approaching. As we communicated clearly via several urgent emails, the registered corporate guarantor explicitly flagged the previously submitted authorization form as highly fraudulent. We absolutely cannot process any event setup, catering orders, or floral arrangements until this massive legal liability is completely resolved with guaranteed funds." Julian's face flushed a deep, angry red, but he desperately maintained his arrogant smirk for the benefit of the watching Vances. He stepped aggressively closer to the reception desk, leaning his body weight forward to physically intimidate Sarah. "Listen to me very carefully. I just told my future father-in-law, my brother Ethan is on his way right now. He made a stupid mistake. He is just an amateur event planner. He gets easily confused with complex corporate paperwork. You are absolutely not going to ruin my expensive wedding over a minor clerical error. Do you have any idea how much catering business I bring to the city? I will have your job by tomorrow morning." Sarah did not blink. She did not take a single step backward. "I am fully aware of our strict corporate policies, sir. A forged signature on a legally binding financial contract is not a minor clerical error. It is a severe legal liability and a matter for the police." My mother suddenly stood up from the velvet sofa, the newspaper falling from my father's lap. Her voice was trembling uncontrollably as she tried to intervene and control the narrative. "Miss, please, I beg you to lower your voice. This is just a private family matter. My two boys just had a silly, petty argument over a little girl's birthday cake this past weekend. Ethan is just being a little stubborn and dramatic because he wants attention. He will be here any minute to fix this entire mess and pay the bill." Clara frowned deeply, stepping away from Julian. "Wait a minute. An argument over a birthday cake? Julian, what on earth is your mother talking about? You explicitly told me Ethan was having a severe mental breakdown because of his ongoing custody battle with Rachel. You said he was projecting his divorce trauma onto our happiness. You never mentioned anything about a child's birthday cake." The sheer, massive web of toxic lies Julian had spun was breathtaking to witness. He had told Clara I was clinically crazy. He had told her I was actively losing custody of Lily. He had deliberately weaponized my painful, traumatic past to cover his own pathetic financial tracks. "It is absolutely nothing, Clara," Julian snapped viciously, his charming facade cracking violently down the middle. "Ethan is just deeply jealous of me. He has always been intensely jealous of my salary, my promotion, and my life. He wants to ruin this beautiful day because his own life is a miserable, lonely failure. Just ignore them." That was my final cue. The trap was perfectly set. I pushed open the concealed door of the security room and stepped slowly into the grand lobby. I thought the worst was over. I was about to prove him so incredibly wrong. My heavy leather dress shoes struck the polished Italian marble floor with a sharp, commanding rhythm. Every single head in the massive lobby snapped around to look at me. The ambient noise of the hotel staff working in the background seemed to completely vanish, replaced by the heavy, suffocating tension radiating from my family. Julian's wide eyes locked onto me instantly. For a fleeting fraction of a second, a pathetic flash of profound relief crossed his face. In his deeply narcissistic, delusional mind, he actually thought I had caved to the pressure. He genuinely believed that the aggressive phone calls, the threats from his groomsmen, and the sheer, overwhelming weight of the family's impending public embarrassment had successfully broken my spine. He thought the obedient younger brother had arrived to hand over his credit card and clean up the mess. Finally, Julian hissed loudly, marching aggressively across the lobby toward me, closing the distance. Tell this ridiculous woman behind the desk she is making a massive mistake. Tell her the signature on that document is yours, put your company card on the master file, and let's get this stupid nightmare over with. You have humiliated me in front of Clara's parents enough for one day. Do your job, Ethan. I did not even look at him. I did not acknowledge his existence. I walked right past him, the fabric of my tailored suit brushing against his arm, and stopped directly in front of Clara and her parents. I offered a polite, deeply respectful nod to Mr. Vance. Mr. Vance, Mrs. Vance, Clara? I said, my voice incredibly calm, steady, and projecting clearly across the silent room. My name is Ethan Reynolds. I deeply apologize for the tension and the uncomfortable scene taking place in this room today. But you are about to merge your respected family with mine, and you deserve to know the absolute, unfiltered truth before you legally bind your daughter to this man. Julian practically lunged at me, grabbing my shoulder roughly with his hand. Shut your mouth right now, Ethan. Just sign the damn paper and go back to your miserable apartment. I did not flinch. I reached up, grabbed his wrist, and shoved his hand off my shoulder with enough sudden, violent force to make him stumble backward and nearly lose his balance on the slick marble. I reached inside the breast pocket of my suit jacket, pulled out a pristine, legally notarized copy of the forged contract, and handed it directly into Mr. Vance's waiting hand. 3 days ago, I said, speaking slowly and clearly so that every single syllable echoed off the vaulted ceilings. Julian threw my 8-year-old daughter's birthday cake into a garbage can at a restaurant and laughed about it right to my face. When I refused to tolerate his psychological abuse and walked away from the table, he entered a state of sheer panic. Because he knew, with absolute certainty, that he did not have the financial liquidity to pay for this luxury venue. He never had the money. He took my highly confidential corporate tax ID, traced my signature, and submitted a fraudulent financial guarantee to this property to steal $35,000 of my corporate credit. Mr. Vance stared down at the paper, his jaw tightening. His face turned an alarming, furious shade of pale as his eyes scanned the forged signature and the fraudulent corporate details. Clara covered her mouth with both hands, her wide eyes darting frantically between my calm face and Julian's terrified expression. My father suddenly stormed over from the velvet sofa, his face flushed purple with uncontrolled rage. Ethan, you are completely out of your mind. You are actively destroying your brother's life and his future over a piece of cheap supermarket cake. You are deliberately humiliating this entire family in public. Sign the paper right now, pay the bill, or you are no longer a part of this family. We will completely disown you. I looked my father dead in the eye. I looked at the man who had callously refused to help me during the darkest, most terrifying days of my divorce. The man who had gladly funded Julian's extreme arrogance for 35 years while ignoring my struggles. You cannot fire me from a family I already quit years ago, Dad, I said, my voice completely devoid of any warmth or affection. I am absolutely not signing anything. I am not paying a single dime for this charade. Julian let out a desperate, high-pitched, mocking laugh. He pointed a shaking finger at Sarah behind the desk. Fine. You want to play hardball, Ethan? We don't need your pathetic, low-budget little event company anyway. I will put the entire balance on my personal credit cards. Run my cards right now. Swipe them for the full 35 grand. Sarah looked at Julian with an expression of pure, unadulterated professional pity. She did not even reach for the credit card terminal. Sir, your personal credit cards were already declined twice by our merchant system yesterday afternoon. Furthermore, due to the explicit submission of fraudulent, forged legal documents, our strict corporate compliance policy requires us to terminate your contract immediately. The Grand Ballroom is officially released back to the open market. You have no reservation here. You absolutely cannot do that, Julian screamed, his voice cracking, echoing wildly off the massive crystal chandeliers. I will sue this place into the ground. I will find the actual owner of this building. I will have your job, and I will bankrupt this entire hotel. You don't know who you are messing with. I looked at Sarah. She gave me a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. The steel jaws of the trap were about to snap entirely shut. I really don't think you will be suing the owner of this property, Julian, I said softly, the quiet tone cutting through his hysterical screaming. He whipped his head around to glare at me, his eyes wide and bloodshot. And why the hell is that, you broke, miserable loser? I smiled. It was a cold, genuine, incredibly satisfying smile. Because you are currently yelling right at him. I thought the silence in the restaurant on Saturday had been profound. The absolute, suffocating silence that immediately fell over the Grand Ballroom in that exact moment was unlike anything I had ever experienced. It was deafening. It was the distinct, heavy sound of a carefully constructed, decades-long reality completely disintegrating into dust. Right on cue, the heavy mahogany doors of the executive suite on the second-floor balcony opened. Marcus stepped out and began descending the grand staircase. Marcus was my trusted business partner, the co-founder, and the acting public CEO of our massive hospitality group. He was a tall, imposing man who naturally commanded absolute authority the moment he entered any room. He carried a heavy, leather-bound corporate binder under his arm. He walked purposefully across the lobby floor, completely ignoring Julian, my parents, and the stunned Vance family. He stopped directly in front of me and extended his hand warmly. "Good morning, Ethan," Marcus said, his deep voice booming across the marble. "I stayed up late reviewing the quarterly real estate acquisitions and the new salary structures you sent over last night. The profit numbers look absolutely fantastic. We are fully capitalized and ready to close on the new downtown commercial property whenever you give the final green light to the legal team." I shook his hand firmly, maintaining the professional facade. "Thank you, Marcus. I will review the final lawsuit contingencies and contracts tonight in my home office." Julian stared at us, his mouth hanging slightly open. His brain was desperately trying to process the complex information, aggressively trying to reject the horrifying reality unfolding right in front of his eyes. My mother stopped twisting her purse, her hands freezing in midair. My father slowly lowered his newspaper, his eyes wide with utter, paralyzing shock. What the hell is he talking about?" Julian stammered, pointing a violently shaking finger at Marcus. "Ethan runs a tiny, pathetic event planning business out of a cheap strip mall. He is a glorified party planner. He barely affords child support." Marcus turned to look slowly at Julian. His expression hardened into a mask of pure, elite corporate disdain. "Your brother is the majority shareholder and the co-founder of this entire hospitality group. He owns this building. He owns the luxury building across town. He pays my executive salary. He is one of the wealthiest, most successful commercial real estate developers in this entire district." The words hung in the air like a physical, crushing weight, dropping directly onto my family's chest. I was about to watch the ultimate destruction of the golden boy. I watched Julian's face transform in real time. The toxic arrogance, the deeply ingrained smug superiority, the 3.5 decades of unconditionally believing he was the untouchable golden child. All of it melted away in a matter of seconds. It was entirely replaced by raw, unadulterated, suffocating terror. He looked wildly around the massive, opulent ballroom, staring at the crystal chandeliers and the marble columns, realizing for the very first time that he was standing squarely inside my empire. He had arrogantly tried to steal $35,000 from the very man who effectively owned the bank. My mother let out a small, high-pitched, strangled gasp. She gripped my father's arm so tightly her knuckles turned white. "Ethan, you actually own this entire place? Since when? Why on earth didn't you tell us you had this kind of money?" "Because I knew exactly what you would do," I said, my voice completely devoid of warmth, echoing with cold detachment. "I knew you would immediately demand a massive piece of it. I knew you would fully expect me to fund Julian's expensive lifestyle, pay off his debts, and buy you a new house. I built this massive portfolio for Lily. I built her future college fund and her inheritance from the ground up while you treated us both like absolute garbage. And you proved my point perfectly. The very first time Julian needed money, you broke into my private home, stole my highly sensitive tax documents, and actively helped him commit a felony." Mr. Vance stepped forward, breaking the frozen tableau. His face was a terrifying mask of cold, aristocratic fury. He looked at Julian as if he were looking at a cockroach, then turned his gaze to me. "Ethan, are you telling me, on the record, that Julian does not have the liquid funds to pay for this wedding? That he deliberately forged your signature to secure a corporate credit line from your own company without even knowing you were the owner?" "That is exactly what I am telling you, Mr. Vance," I replied, maintaining unbroken eye contact with the patriarch. "Julian is actively drowning in massive consumer debt. His luxury cars are leased and behind on payments. His expensive watches are heavily financed. He has absolutely nothing to his name except a massive ego and a history of manipulation." Clara let out a sharp, ragged, painful breath. She walked slowly up to Julian. She looked deeply at the man she was supposed to marry in less than 72 hours. "Julian, look at me right now. Is this true? Did you forge his signature to steal money?" Julian was fully panicking now. The invisible walls were rapidly closing in, crushing the breath out of his lungs. He tried to reach out and grab her hands, but she stepped back violently, repulsed by his touch. "Clara, baby, please, you have to listen to me. It is just a temporary cash flow problem. The stock market is down right now. I just needed a quick bridge loan to cover the venue. Ethan is a multimillionaire. He could have just paid it quietly. He is doing this publicly just to humiliate me. He is ruining our special day because of a stupid, worthless cake." Clara's eyes filled with tears, but they were hot, blinding tears of rage, not sorrow. "A stupid, worthless cake? You threw your 8-year-old niece's birthday cake in the trash? You lied to me about his terrible divorce. You explicitly told me Rachel took all his money and that he was deeply bitter and unstable. You told me he was crazy. You have been systematically lying to me since the very day we met." My father suddenly stepped directly between us, holding his hands up like a desperate referee trying to stop a knockout punch. The sheer, blinding hypocrisy of the man was utterly astounding. Now that he realized I possessed immense wealth and power, his entire demeanor completely shifted from aggressive bully to a groveling peacemaker. Okay. Let's all just take a deep breath and calm down," he said, trying to force a jovial, reasonable tone. "This is clearly just a massive misunderstanding between brothers. Ethan's son, you really should have told us about your amazing success. We are so incredibly proud of you. Look, you own the building. That makes this incredibly easy. Just comp the ballroom. Give the venue space to your brother as a wedding gift. It won't cost you a single dime out of pocket, and we can keep this wonderful family together." I stared at my father, feeling a deep, profound pity for the pathetic man standing in front of me. He truly believed that a high net worth erased decades of psychological abuse. He genuinely believed that my success was somehow a communal family asset he was fully entitled to manage. "You do not get to call me son," I said quietly, the heavy finality of the statement echoing loudly through the lobby. When Rachel tried to drain my bank accounts and take my daughter away from me in family court, you refused to lend me a single dollar for a lawyer. You told me I was a failure as a man. You stood there and watched Julian spit on my daughter's happiness. You do not get to claim my success now that it is financially convenient for you. I turned to my manager. Sarah, do you have the legal paperwork from Thomas and Associates? Sarah nodded sharply. She pulled a thick stack of heavy, watermarked legal documents from her manila folder and handed them directly to Julian. What is this? Julian asked, his voice shaking uncontrollably as he stared at the heavy legal stationery bearing the crest of the city's most ruthless corporate law firm. That is a formal, legally binding cease and desist order from my corporate attorneys, I explained, my voice echoing with absolute authority. It details the exact legal nature of your forgery, wire fraud, and identity theft. Attached to it is a formal notice of financial liability. You personally owe this venue $5,000 in non-refundable, breach of contract cancellation fees. If that exact amount of money is not wired by 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, my legal team will hand the undeniable physical evidence of your fraud to the district attorney's office. I pulled out a second, thinner envelope from my jacket pocket and handed it to my parents. My mother took it with violently trembling hands, tears streaming down her face. And that, I said, looking right into her weeping eyes, is a court-approved restraining order signed by a superior court judge. You, Dad, and Julian are legally barred from coming within 500 feet of my home, my corporate offices, Lily's school, or anywhere near my daughter. If you attempt to contact me, if you show up on my porch again crying, or if you ever send your idiot groomsman like Leo to threaten me over the phone, I will have you instantly arrested and thrown in jail. This is not a negotiation. This is the absolute end. My mother completely broke down. She collapsed heavily onto the velvet sofa, weeping loudly, clutching the legal documents against her chest as if they were a lifeline. Ethan, please, we are your parents. You cannot do this to us. We are your family. You are tearing us apart. You chose your family when you deliberately stole my tax returns, I said, feeling absolutely nothing inside. The deep well of empathy I used to carry for them had run completely dry. I thought the destruction of my family's toxic illusion was finally complete. But the final, most devastating blow of the morning was not going to be delivered by me. It was going to come from the very woman Julian had manipulated for years. Clara had been standing quietly off to the side, silently absorbing the absolute devastation of the man she loved. Now, she stepped directly into the center of the storm. Clara reached for her left hand. Slowly, methodically, and with devastating precision, she pulled the massive diamond engagement ring off her finger. The very ring Julian had arrogantly bragged about for months at every family dinner. The ring I now knew for a fact was financed on a high-interest predatory credit card he could never afford to pay off. She held the heavy ring in the open palm of her hand and looked directly at Julian. There was no hysterical screaming. There was no theatrical breakdown for the audience. There was only the cold, sharp, terrifying clarity of a smart woman who had finally woken up from a very long, very deceptive nightmare. Julian, Clara said, her voice eerily calm and steady. I want you to know something very important. I didn't come down here today just because the venue called my father about a payment issue. I came down here because my private investigator called me. Julian stopped breathing. The remaining color completely drained from his face, leaving him looking like a terrified ghost. You're what? What investigator? Mr. Vance stepped forward, placing a highly protective hand on his daughter's shoulder. We hired a private financial investigator a month ago, Julian, Mr. Vance said, his voice laced with absolute, unyielding disgust. Clara noticed glaring discrepancies in your stories about your massive corporate salary and your supposed real estate investments. She noticed you constantly deflecting basic questions about your credit score when we discussed buying a house in the suburbs. We ran a full, comprehensive, legally obtained background check on you. Clara dropped the engagement ring onto the polished marble surface of the reception desk. The heavy diamond hit the stone with a sharp, piercing clink that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. "You are bankrupt, Julian," Clara said, her voice echoing mercilessly. "Your luxury car is exactly 3 months behind on lease payments and slated for repossession. You have maxed out 6 different credit cards. You don't have a massive executive salary. You are a mid-level management drone who just got officially put on a disciplinary performance improvement plan at work. You systematically lied to me about your finances, you lied to me about your brother, and you proved to me today that you are a cruel, narcissistic coward who would throw a child's cake in the trash just to feel a fleeting sense of power." Julian literally fell to his knees. He dropped to his knees on the cold Italian marble floor in the middle of the grand lobby. The golden boy, the untouchable, perfect pride and joy of the family, was completely and utterly broken. He reached out desperately, trying to grab the hem of Clara's dress. "Clara, please, please don't do this to me. I did it all for you. I just wanted to give you the beautiful wedding you deserved. I can fix this. I swear I can change. Give me another chance." Clara stepped back quickly, looking at him with nothing but sheer, cold pity. "You didn't do a single thing for me. You did it entirely for your own ego. The wedding is completely canceled. My parents are contacting all the vendors this afternoon to pull our funding. Do not ever attempt to contact me again. If you do, my father's lawyers will handle you." She turned around, linked arms with her father, and walked purposefully toward the grand glass exit. Mrs. Vance paused for a brief moment, looking down at my parents still sitting paralyzed on the sofa. "You raised an absolute monster," Mrs. Vance said quietly, her words dripping with venom, directed specifically at my mother. "And you deserve every ounce of the absolute misery he is going to bring into your lives." With that final, devastating sentence, the Vance family walked out the heavy glass doors, disappearing into the bright, clear morning sun. The massive lobby was completely silent, save for the pathetic sound of my mother sobbing into her hands and Julian hyperventilating on the floor. My father was staring blankly at the wall, completely paralyzed by the utter public destruction of his family's carefully curated reputation. I looked at Sarah and Marcus. "Have the security team escort them off the property immediately," I instructed, my voice flat. "If they refuse to leave, call the local police." I did not wait around to watch them be physically dragged out of my building. I turned my back on my weeping parents, on my broken brother, and on 35 agonizing years of toxic, suffocating emotional abuse. I walked calmly out the staff entrance, got into my luxury sedan, and drove away. As I merged onto the busy city highway, a strange, overwhelming physical sensation washed completely over my body. It wasn't a feeling of arrogant triumph. It wasn't even joy. It was a profound, deeply settling, quiet relief. The massive, crushing weight I had been violently carrying on my shoulders since I was a little boy was suddenly gone. I didn't have to fix their horrible mistakes anymore. I didn't have to absorb their cruel insults. I didn't have to protect them from the harsh consequences of their own horrific actions. I was completely, wonderfully, permanently free. A full month has passed since that dramatic morning in the grand ballroom. Time has a funny, beautiful way of shifting when you finally cut the toxic anchors out of your life. The heavy, dark clouds that used to hover over my daily routine simply vanished into thin air. I kept my promise to Lily. The following weekend, we hosted the ultimate redo birthday party at our spacious home. I invited her favorite teacher, Ms. Chloe, and the entire class of second graders. The house was filled with the beautiful sound of children laughing, upbeat music playing, and absolute, unbridled joy. When it came time for the dessert, I didn't bring out a cake. I brought out 2 massive silver trays of artisan cupcakes. They were beautifully decorated with bright purple frosting and edible silver glitter. Lily had specifically requested cupcakes instead of a large cake. Before she blew out the small candles, she looked up at me, her big brown eyes shining with pure happiness, and whispered, "Daddy, I wanted cupcakes so that everyone gets their own special piece, and so that nobody can ever throw the whole thing away." I pulled her into a tight, fierce hug, fighting back the heavy tears welling in my eyes. Nobody is ever going to throw your happiness away again, Lily. I promised her, kissing the top of her head, and only good, kind people are allowed in our house from now on. That simple, profound statement became my absolute, unshakable philosophy for life. I heard through the legal grapevine exactly what happened to my family. The fallout was absolutely catastrophic. Julian's employer found out about the severe fraud allegations when Thomas officially served the liability paperwork to garnish his wages. Combined with his incredibly poor work performance, they fired him immediately. Without Clara's family to blindly fund his lifestyle, his leased luxury car was repossessed in the middle of the night by a tow truck. He was forced to move out of his expensive apartment and crawl back into my parents' small house, bankrupt, publicly humiliated, and utterly defeated. My mother tried to violate the court-ordered restraining order exactly one time. She showed up at the front gate of Lily's school, crying hysterically and demanding to see her granddaughter to give her a toy. The school security guard, whom I had fully briefed and provided with the official legal documents, stopped her at the door. The police were immediately called. She spent a humiliating night in a concrete holding cell, which finally convinced her that I was absolutely terrifyingly serious. A few days ago, I received a short, unexpected text message from a new number. It was Clara. She wrote, "Ethan, I wanted to formally thank you. You telling the absolute truth that day in the hotel lobby saved me from making the biggest, most devastating mistake of my life. I am doing well, focusing on my career. I truly hope you and Lily are thriving. You are a profoundly good father." I replied simply, thanking her and wishing her the absolute best in her new life. Sometimes, people ask me if I feel any lingering guilt. They ask if I regret destroying my brother's life and permanently alienating my parents. In our society, we are heavily, consistently conditioned to believe that family is everything, that blood ties somehow magically excuse any level of psychological abuse, financial manipulation, and cruelty. But I am here to tell you, from the bottom of my heart, that is a toxic lie. Guilt exclusively belongs to the people who betray their core values. Guilt belongs to the people who throw a child's birthday cake in the trash. When someone actively tries to destroy your peace, steal your hard-earned success, and weaponize your children against you, walking away is not a betrayal. Walking away is an act of profound, necessary self-respect. I did not ruin Julian's wedding. Julian ruined Julian's wedding by being a pathological liar, a narcissist, and a thief. I simply stopped paying the emotional and financial bill for his crippling arrogance. I stood my ground, I protected my daughter's future, and I honored my own boundaries. Motherhood and fatherhood can entirely change the shape of your courage. I tolerated their blatant disrespect for decades when it was aimed squarely at me. But the exact moment they aimed their cruelty at my little girl, they introduced themselves to a version of me they had never met, and a version of me they could never, ever defeat. Let's pause for a moment. Thank you for staying with me this far, you're truly amazing. Please help me by liking the video and commenting the number 1 below so I know you've been here with me until this point. This not only helps more people discover this story, but also lets me know that my experiences mean something to someone. Your support is the greatest motivation for me to keep sharing the rest of this journey. Have you ever faced something similar with your own family? Have you ever had to draw a hard, unforgiving line to protect your children or your own mental health from toxic relatives? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next journey. Stay strong, protect your peace, and never let anyone make you feel small in your own life.